Hello and welcome to the Star Trek CCG World Championship Finals for First Edition 2025. My name is Kaiser and I had the honor of hosting this World Championship weekend. And in this final confrontation, we can see two players who went to Kaiser several times over the last few years. And they are using the green sleeves at the top of the table here. Niall Matthew from Scotland, who goes by the name of Sexecutioner. And on the bottom of the screen, using the yellow sleeves, we have Andreas Rheinländer from Berlin, Germany. Now, Niall won day one using a Cardassian deck. Andreas came in 7th, likewise playing Cardassians. In the second day, Niall beat Alek Lache from the Czech Republic in the quarterfinals and then Paddy Ty from England in the semifinals, whereas Andreas had to go through two former world champions, Michael van Bremen in the quarterfinals and Stefan Slaby from Austria in the semifinals. As we can see them shuffling their decks, let's go a little bit over their opponents in day one. Niall had 2 earned buys since he benefited from the handed down double buy from the European Continental Championship as runner-up, and his opponents on day one after those 2 buys were Michael van Bremen, Florian Huber from Germany, and Paddy Ty. And Andreas had to run the gauntlet of 5 matches. He beat Markus Eberlein's Klingons in the first round. He beat Alex Schmidt's Borg in the second round. He beat Peter Ludwig's Terran Empire deck in the third round. He lost to Justin Ford's Bajorans in the fourth round. And then he defeated Maggie Geppert's Federation TOS deck in the final round, booking his slot in the final. Now, Andreas's wins were all modified wins, so apparently he was using some strategy that involves slowing the opponent down, and we'll see if he has similar things up his sleeve for this final confrontation here. And now players get ready to decide who gets the first turn. Usually we do that with a dice roll. Andreas has got his 6 missions in his hand. Gives them another shuffle. And there we get ready for the dice roll. Andreas has an 11. And Niall tries to beat that with an 11 of his own. So we'll get to do this again. Andreas now has what looks like another 11. And Niall has a 10 this time. So Andreas goes first, meaning if the game goes to the time limit and no player has reached win conditions yet, then Niall will get to play the very last turn. Now, Niall seats a regular Q's tent and a battle bridge door. Andreas has no doorways whatsoever. That is very interesting. Niall cuts his missions, and Andreas puts the first mission on the table. Let's see what it is. It's verify evidence in the Badlands in the Alpha Quadrant. Niall puts down locate terrorist leader, a planet. Andreas has study Badlands, staying in the region with another space mission. Niall has steel green armament. Andreas has verify evidence, which Niall doubles up, and now we have an illegal deck because divert attention and verify evidence are 2 versions of the same location. They are both the rendezvous point in the Alpha Quadrant, so Andreas cannot have these 2 missions in his deck at the same time. But the players don't seem to notice this, and they play on regularly. As we can see, Andreas has now 6 missions in the Badlands region, which can be used for a distinct advantage with a certain card. And if we go through the missions from the right side, he has 3 planets: break prisoner, search for survivors, find hidden base, study Badlands, divert attention, and verify evidence. But as you can see, if you look it up in the card database, divert attention and verify evidence are two versions of the same mission and cannot be in the same deck. Niall has his own verify evidence and locate terrorist leader, steal Breen armament, the space mission that already has some dilemmas there is Clash at Chintoka, and to the far left we have the Cardassian homeworld orb negotiations and one in that is resist occupying forces, so it looks like Niall is playing his Cardassian Liberation Front deck again that he used on the first day. And now it's time to see dilemmas. In Niall's hand I can see among others an Edo probe, and the higher the fewer. I think the other one looks like a shuttle crash, so he's probably going for some point loss. Andreas is likewise preparing his dilemmas, and it looks like they both have a huge stack of dilemmas. Niall, I think, had 23 dilemmas in his day one deck, and as we will see later, Andreas is indeed playing with a whopping 29 dilemmas. So both players will have to run an incredible gauntlet if they want to complete mission points. But as we can see here from the spaceline, it looks like the way the deck is set up on Andreas's part means that he has an advantage that he shouldn't have, because if he's playing indeed with 6 Alpha Quadrant Badlands missions, that means he can draw 4 cards with the event Strategic Sector, so one better than a regular Keeper's Fortune Collector. And as best as I can remember, this should not be possible, but because at the moment there are only 5 Alpha Quadrant Badlands missions that you can play at the same time. And we'll see if he's going to use that in his strategy, but I assume he is, because then that will give him a lot of card advantage that he can use for various interrupts and whatever else he would like to do. But as I said, he didn't realize it himself. None of his opponents so far have realized, and it looks like Niall also isn't aware of the fact that verify evidence and divert attention are indeed mission cards that represent the same location. Okay, looks like Niall is mostly done. I see another higher the fewer in his hand. I can't see what kind of dilemmas Andreas has. I know that at recent tournaments he used, for example, combinations like your galaxy is impure, a minion disintegration protocol, misinterpreted history, rules of obedience. So lots of dilemmas that take out one person and then require a certain combination of skills to get through. Dilemmas that have been very, very popular. Occasionally you can see people stocking the counter interrupts, Team of Ambassadors and Change of Heart, but I haven't seen them too much this weekend. Looks like Niall has already put his dilemma stacks under Andreas's missions and has prepared some for the shared mission there. Andreas has likewise prepared his stacks, but has not committed to putting them under yet. Looks like he has 4 dilemmas left and is debating whether he wants to put them under the shared mission. He's double checking again. It looks like 5 under that planet there. And that's 5 for that planet. And that's 5 or maybe even 6 for the Cardassian homeworld. Quite the opposite of what we saw in, for example, Peter Ludwig's Day 1 deck. He ran only 12 dilemmas, a deck that works on the premise of just having a huge head start attempting a mission with 8 or 10 people on turn 1, and then hoping to ride that head start across the finish line. All right, looks like Andreas has finally picked the order of his dilemmas. And now he puts them under Niall's missions. Let's see what they're going to do with the shared mission verify evidence. They're right in the middle of the space line. Niall's counting the dilemmas under his missions. He is probably debating where to put a potential self-seed. So at verify evidence, Andreas puts down 1 dilemma. And there is Niall with the self-seed in the blue-colored sleeve. He puts it at a space mission, so it can't be your everyday artifact because those go at planets. So it's likely Mysterious Orb that he has seeded there. Or it might also be a dilemma, but that one he would probably have in the same sleeve as his other dilemmas. Okay, they have put dilemmas under verify evidence, and they are ready to start the first turn. Andreas puts down his only seed card, its continuing mission, which in turn downloads Defending the Home, and that one downloads, they call themselves the Maquis. So what Andreas can do with this one seed card that grabs 2 others is he can play 2 Maquis personnel for free, and he can draw 1 card. So at the moment he is at play 3 and draw 2. Niall has new arrivals and reshape the quadrant, downloading Cardassian Liberation Front, and as far as I can see, 2 hidden agendas. They cut each other's decks, and then they are ready to draw their starting hands. And there is the handshake. Let's see what these 2 gentlemen do with the cards they've been dealt. If the camera is shaking, it's probably because people are bumping into the table all the time. Andreas plays a Macius for free. He draws a card with continuing mission. And he plays a mutation, cycling a card away from hand with that interrupt. And then there is a version of Kalita, also for free. And then his regular card play is Strategic Sector. And if I see that correctly, he is indeed drawing 4 cards. 3 because he has 6 missions in the Badlands, and another extra because he has no facility in that region. Then he draws his regular card to end, and Niall is starting off by playing a ship, and his engine allows him to play a universal personnel for free. And with Cardassian Liberation Front, he can download the event Revolutionaries that allows him to download 2 Cardassian dissidents, which is likely what we're going to see at several points during this game. Niall fetches Security Chief Odo with Defend Homeworld and uses his download of Process Ore to get Process Ore mining. So with geologists at that location here, resist occupying forces, he gets to cycle cards and draw 1 extra at the start of his turn. And then it's over to Andreas. He plays a mutation trying to cycle away Belana Taurus. But it looks like Niall interferes with an interrupt. Andreas trying to play the next mutation. There's a free play of Anheizer, and there is Santos. Card plays Strategic Sector, and Niall plays a Kevin Uxbridge to deny that. Andreas with 4 personal now. He uses Mace's game text to exchange him for a Maquis personal in his discard pile. That's the Belana Taurus. And she has a Voyager property logo, but Andreas is not playing her, but rather exchanging her, which is not playing. So he gets around the TNG property logo limitations. The personal on the planet find a hidden fighter. Looks like it's going to be a runabout. Since Belana Taurus is Federation Maquis, she can switch to Federation affiliation and pilot the runabout legally. Andreas also fetches the established landing protocols that Hidden Fighter allows. Shuffles his deck. Established landing protocols goes on the table, Hidden Fighter is discarded, and the runabout is on the planet. Checking his hand if there is anything else he wants to play. He puts some people inside the runabout, and one person starts a mission attempt there, and it is an Edo probe. And Andreas aborts the mission attempt, draws 1 card to end his turn. Okay, let's go back to Niall. By the way, the person he downloaded with Defend Homeworld is of course not Security Chief Odo, but rather Overseer Odo. Now he's debating what to do. He discards a card from hand for process or mining, drawing 2 cards, and scoring a point. With his engine card, he downloads Revolutionaries, and he grabs 2 copies of the same Universal Cardassian Dissident. Shuffles his deck. That was his regular card play, so he should have a Universal free play. Looks like it's Parn. And he's debating whether to attempt the mission there or fly some personnel to a different mission, but it's going to be a mission attempt. No, not yet. He was probably double checking how many dilemmas were under that mission. But it looks like there are more dilemmas there than personnel. So he shows Andreas the staffing for his ship, and it looks like he's going to move it somewhere else. He moves it over to Steel Breen Armament and does a red shirt mission attempt there, and that looks like it's Primal Urges, which requires a male and a female to pass, and with this red shirt mission attempt Niall can't do that, so he draws 1 plus 1 extra with new arrivals. It's over to Andreas. He plays another copy of Macius. The one he played before was cycled back. Niall plays a hidden fighter on Andreas's turn to get a ship of his own. Andreas card plays strategic sector for 4 more draws. Niall is still looking through his deck, trying to find the hidden fighter ship. Andreas plays another copy of Kalita. He should now have 6 personnel in play. Niall grabs his own copy of Established Landing Protocols. Andreas puts everyone aboard the runabout, flies next door to search for rebels. And then he plays a copy of Preparation. Preparation allows Andreas to look at the bottom seat card there by showing 4 different classifications, which he has. He has engineer, officer, civilian, and security. So Niall has to reveal the bottom seat card. That looks like it's a volcanic eruption, so that's definitely going to kill 1 personnel. So one strategy here could be to attempt with 2 personnel, sacrificing one of them to the eruption, but then the other personnel would go on and get a look at the next seed card there. And I think this is indeed what Andreas has in mind. He sets 2 personnel aside. One of them must be Anheizer or Belana because he needs a Federation personnel to attempt the mission and can't only send his non-alliance. So there is the volcanic eruption, and Niall gets to kill one of them. And it looks like it is indeed Anheizer. And they reveal the next seed card. I can't see exactly which one it is, but it's probably something like Rules of Obedience, because the other personnel there, Kalita, is also killed. So we have a volcanic eruption on the planet, and we know what the next dilemma is going to be and can plan accordingly. Andreas is double checking his resources in play, draws a card, and sends it back to Niall. At the start of his turn, Niall is doing the process ore cycling, showing his geologists. So he gets to discard 1, draw 1, essentially. Or draw 2, rather. His card play will again be spent on downloading a copy of Revolutionaries. And this looks like we have 2 copies of Belva. Revolutionaries goes into the discard pile. The 2 Belvas go on the planet's surface. And Niall should still have his universal free play. Probably debating which skill to bring in. Or maybe he doesn't actually have a free play that he can use in hand. So he's going to attempt the mission. It's still Primal Urges, which he can't pass with only 1 person. It looks like Niall is keeping some personnel on the planet's surface there, flies the Hideki cruiser over to where his other ship is. And this time he attempts with 3. Apparently, Andreas just reminded him of the dilemma that he encountered earlier. It wasn't actually a mission attempt. Andreas plays a strategic sector to draw cards. He mutates away a Michael Addington, but that is hit with a Amanda Rogers. Then we have a free play of Anheizer. Now we have another attempt at mutating away Michael Addington. This time it goes through. Andreas draws his 2 cards. He still has another free play, but it must be a unique this time. Apparently doesn't have one. So Maces exchanges for Michael Addington. There are no personnel on the planet's surface, so nobody was killed by the volcanic eruption. As we can see, Andreas has more copies of Strategic Sector and Mutations and Runabouts in his hand. And he's thinking what to do next. Counts the dilemmas on the search for rebels again, but decides to draw a card and end his turn. Niall again discards a card and uses his 2 geologists to cycle and draw a card with Process for Mining. He looks through his deck for another copy of Revolutionaries. On day 1 he was running 7 or 8 copies, so he shouldn't run out anytime soon. There's one, and there's another dissident. And there is the card he needs to discard for those 2 guys. And do we get a universal free play? There it is. So 3 more bodies for Niall this turn. I don't see too many interrupts in his hand. And then he's looking at his 2 ships. Does he want to get rid of the primal urges now? He has 3 personnel, so he could sacrifice a male and a female and have 1 personnel going on, but he decides to fly back to resist occupying forces. And it looks like he's happy with that turn, and he draws to end. Andreas plays a mutation to put Captain Chakotay into the discard pile. Draws 2. Niall plays another hidden fighter. There is Maces again. That is 1 free play. And there is another Anheizer, that's the second free play. Andreas still has his regular card play, which is again spent on a strategic sector, drawing 4. And as we know, that should be a maximum of 3. And he plays a Starfleet Type 1 phaser for some extra strength. Meanwhile, Niall has found another Hideki cruiser for some more mobility. Andreas does the Macias exchange trick again, grabbing Captain Chakotay. Niall is verifying what cards he played. And Andreas now has a few new bodies to throw at missions. What does he do? He seems to be unsure whether he wants to continue at Search for Rebels. Counting his personnel and skills yet again. If the dilemma was something like Rules of Obedience, of course, you need to make sure that after the kill, you still have the correct skills. But Andreas decides that he's happy with this turn. And he draws 1. Tries to play another Hidden Fighter, which is cancelled. And it looks like the turn is back to Niall. He discards something to fuel his process or mining. Draws 2 cards. Goes through his deck for likely another copy of Revolutionaries and 2 Dissidents. Can't seem to find it in the first stack of his deck. There's another Revolutionaries, and we're looking for 2 Universal Cardassian Dissidents. There they are. And Niall is shuffling his deck again. So now with 3 ships and several personnel, there's another free play from new arrivals. He might try for another mission here. It looks like he's going to keep a few personnel back at his process or mining location, but a big chunk of his resources goes on the Hideki cruiser, meets up with the stolen attack ship at Steel Breen Armament, and now he's debating whether to attempt big or small here. There's the mission attempt with 3 from what I can see. And Primal Urges gets Belva and one of the male personnel. So if I remember the card correctly, it is Niall's choice who to send. For Belva, he has no choice. For the others, he can decide. And they are relocated all the way to the other end of the space line to break prisoner. But the other personnel gets to see the next dilemma. And it looks like it's more of your kind, which doesn't do much here. And then it's temporal causality loop. This is, of course, an interesting combo here, because it replaces the things that have been discarded from this mission, but the 2 personnel who were relocated were not actually discarded. They are still in play. So that puts the dilemma back, the primal urges, and it still had its effect. We go back to Andreas. He plays another mutation. We see Maquis, we see Kalita, we see a strategic sector. So several of Andreas' turns have looked the same. Of course, he doesn't have a lot of different resources available in this kind of limited Maquis deck. There's Melville. He comes in from Maquis. And Andreas trying to see which personnel he needs where for his next steps there. Anheizers, Chakotay, Bellana, Eddington. And he can replay all these guys from his hand on his next turns, but he decides to end it, draws a card, and sends it back to Niall, who does his thing of cycling cards away and drawing with processor mining. And undoubtedly we're going to see revolutionaries again. There are absolutely decks who would have completed a mission or two in that number of turns in different matchups, but these 2 decks work on a different premise, and that's why it's slow going here. They know that they need a certain amount of resources to get through each other's dilemmas, and just sending 1 person at a time in all the time would likely lead to such a loss of material that they want to have a bigger attempt at some point. But what do I know? So let's have a look. Niall is playing more bodies. And he knows that if he continues at Steel Green Armament, he's going to encounter the primal urges again. But now he has what looks like 2 copies of Awaiting Trial in play. That's the primal urges again. And Niall has to read Temporal Causality Loop again because that seems to have thrown him off. So another Belva and another Mook are going to join the 2 others over at Break Prisoner. Those 2. Okay. And then it's again more of your kind, which doesn't do much here. And there's the persistent individuality, which will kill the rest of this crew here. So that Hideki cruiser is empty, and to get through the persistent individuality, Niall will need a lot of different classifications. Alright, let's continue. Andreas plays another mutation. There's a Maquis. Niall plays another hidden fighter for another Hideki cruiser. There's another Anheizer on Andreas' side of the table. And he still has his regular card play. There is a strategic sector in his hand, but he apparently has most of the stuff he needs, so he's spending his card play on another ship there. And there is another hidden fighter, and he's bringing out something else from his deck. It's another runabout. And Andreas is debating what to do. There's another copy of Established Landing Protocols, in case one of them gets nullified somehow. The Maquis ship he played, I think, is the Cosette, which is attributes all +2 in the demilitarized zone, but we are in the Badlands here, so that doesn't apply. Maquis does his vanishing trick, and it looks like he turns into Cobb. And then Andreas is sorting his personal. There is a phaser. There's a Kalita, there's Cobb. Adding another Kalita to the mix. Maybe he's preparing for a Hannonian land eel, seeing how he has the phaser there. The Cosette is flying back to break prisoner. And now he has 2 runabouts at Search for Rebels, and he's going to attempt. And there is indeed Hannonian land eel. The Anheizer has security, and the science is on one of the females with the Federation phaser. He has a strength bonus of +1. Niall is double checking everything is correct there, but it looks like they have done the math correctly. And the land eel is beaten, and it's the expected flapjacks, then the neuroparasites with 6 personnel. That means Niall is going to pick 3, and Andreas can prevent one of the 3 deaths by virtue of the phaser he has got there. So 3 people are selected. Anheizer, Cobb, and Kalita. Andreas wants to make sure that he's going to choose the correct one to keep alive with the phaser. And Niall is going to take one of those killed personnel and turn it into a capture with valuable prisoner. So Kalita relocates to his await him there in the Alpha Quadrant, and Niall downloads a labor camp so he can now score points at the start of his turn. The rest of Andreas's await him moves on. And in case you missed it, the final dilemma after the Benevolent Neural Parasites was a founder secret. So Andreas can't do the mission this turn. He needs a lot of strength to get through, or find a tricorder or one of the other things that allows him to get through the founder secret. He ends his turn, and now he reads the labor camp, and that indeed says, while Niall has a captive escorted at the start of his turn, he scores 5 points. So those are the first points from the labor camp here. In addition to the single points he gets from the process or mining, Niall is now up by either 8 or 9 points to 0. He's verifying that he still has the geologists to run the process or mining. Does his cycling again. There's a Belva. Niall doesn't have a lot of females in his deck, so if he runs into another combo with Primal Urges, he needs to make sure that he gets his copies of Belva into play, otherwise he can't get through. And there's another dissident. Niall discards another Revolutionaries that he downloaded with Cardassian Liberation Front. And if he has a Universal Personnel in hand, he can free play one of those as well. Debating which one to use. And he goes for Quark. So that is, of course, not a Universal Personnel. But he can still play for free because he's a Deep Space Nine Cardassian personnel with resistance in lore, or a dissident, and they also can report for free. It's just that he can only use one of his free plays, either from New Arrivals or from Cardassian Liberation Front, without blowing up his New Arrivals. Alright, then Niall is looking at his resources. He has several ships in play. He consolidates his forces at Steel Green Armament, and he knows that there is a persistent individuality, so he tries to make sure he has enough classifications to survive the kills and still have an engineer left to satisfy the last part of the requirements for that dilemma, one of the most popular space dilemmas at the moment. There should be a civilian on Quark, a VIP on Parn, medical on Belva, engineer and officer, I believe, on the others. So he's looking for security and science. If he can't do that, he needs to make sure that he has enough engineers so that one gets through after the kills. So he's shuffling. Andreas is taking his time picking the personnel. He gets a civilian and he gets another personnel. And let's see if Niall still has the engineer. Andreas discards the dilemma. It looks like, yep, Niall shows the engineer. And we are down to the last dilemma there. It looks like it's Ankari spirits. Niall probably doesn't have the 3 honor and high integrity he needs for that, so he immediately shuffles his personnel for the 2 initial kills there. And then it's unlikely that he will be able to cure this with the guys he has now in the attempt, but maybe he has 3 engineer and exobiology left among his other personnel at that mission. So the mission attempt is stopped there. Niall might be able to cure the Ankari spirits with his other personnel, or he might also look at completing the mission. But instead he draws to end and sends it back to Andreas. Andreas plays maces again, because why wouldn't you? And there's also Kalita. Now, Kalita, of course, has been captured, but seeing how she is universal, that is perfectly legal. Andreas follows it up by playing a mutation, putting a Maville into the discard pile, drawing 2 cards. And he still has his card play. Is he going to spend it on another strategic sector to draw even more? But it looks like he is already quite set as far as hand cards are concerned. He plays indeed a strategic sector to draw 4 more. And now the question is, has he managed to put enough resources into play to beat the high strength requirement on Found a Secret? It requires strength greater than 70. And he has 1 phaser that gives him strength +1. So that might not be enough, but he also has Captain Chakotay in play that gives his Maquis personnel attributes +2. He exchanges maces for a Maville with printed strength of 7. And with about 10 bodies in play, that should easily be enough to beat the Founder Secret under Search for Rebels there. He just needs to make sure to have a Federation affiliation personnel in play so he can attempt it, but the Unheizers are good for that. And when I say Search for Rebels, I mean Search and Rescue. That's the mission he's actually attempting, the Federation Veteran 1. It requires navigation ×2, honor, officer, and cunning. The honor can be a bit of a problem. It looks like he has indeed the strength he needs to beat the dilemma, completes the mission for 30 points. And then he moves next door, does a micro attempt at break prisoner. Now that the Edo-probe has gone, he runs into all available personnel. Niall uses that to download a skeleton crew. So Andreas now needs to bring at least 6 personnel to start a mission attempt at that mission. No more redshirting here. Andreas might try and get another attempt in. Checking his hand again. Probably in scorched hand territory, but we're not playing with ref 10s here. So Andreas draws one, ends it, and on Niall's turn, the Ankari Spirits empties the ship by killing the last 2 personnel there. But as a consolation prize, Niall scores 5 points from the labor camp again. He either plays another hidden fighter, or maybe that was the discard for the process or mining, since he showed the 2 geologists there. So he draws 2 cards. Should be on 10 points from labor camp, plus about 5 turns worth of process or mining. So his score probably 30 to 15 for Andreas. Niall now plays a security chief Garrick. And somebody else. Is it Bronok? I don't know the names on the Cardassian dissidents. So if he has the skills in play for Steel Breen Armament, I believe that's Anthropology, Honor, Leadership, and 3 Security, or 3 Cardassian personnel with Resistance in lore, he could go for that mission and take back the lead. But maybe he hasn't got everything he needs. I think Honor can be a bit problematic here as well. Sorry, not Honor. Anthropology is the one that is, as far as I can remember, quite scarce in this deck. Niall deciding what to do, counting his personal skills and attributes. He has a whole lot at Steel Breen Armament, but I think he's sending it over to Andreas. He still hasn't ended his turn. Maybe he's debating whether it's worth putting some personnel at a different position for his next turn. But he is drawing to end here, so it looks like he has not completed Steel Breen Armament yet. This means we're back to Andreas, who of course plays Macius. And yet another copy of Kalita. And his card play this time. First of all, he can't play a mutation because Niall interferes with an Amanda Rogers. So his card play seems to be another strategic sector, but that is likewise cancelled by a Kevin Uxbridge. Andreas is going through his discard pile to find a juicy replacement for Macius, and he finds another Anheizer. By the way, I don't know what this Maquis guy's actual correct pronunciation is, but over here we have taken to calling him Anheizer for various reasons. Andreas is shuffling his personnel around. And now the question is, does he send only 6 personnel to break prisoner or a bigger crew? What's the next dilemma? It is the higher the fewer, and he has indeed sent 6 personnel, loses 6 points. And then I think that is a dead end, which he can't pass since he should be on 24 right now, if my count is correct. He moves his ship over to find hidden base and draws a card to end. Niall scores more points from the labor camp. He's on 15 bonus points from that. And he's probably also going to score more points from the processor mining. Discarding 1 to draw 2. There's another awaiting trial. He plays those for free, and now that he has a captive, that means he can draw extra cards with all these copies of awaiting trial. So he will have a steady flow of Amanda Rogers and Kevin Uxbridge to run interference with whatever verbs Andreas wants to play. If I see that correctly, a Legate Damar is hitting the table. Yes, that's right. And that looks like it's Tekeni Gemor. So 2 uniques there. And Niall is double checking his available resources. Flying to clash at Chintoka, swapping ships. He's daisy chaining his way to resist occupying forces. Flying back to clash at Chintoka, or he's debating whether it's worth going somewhere else. No, he is already committed to going to clash at Chintoka. And then moving on to Steel Breen Armament. Now, I'm unsure whether he has actually completed Steel Breen Armament. I think he had everything in play to complete it, but I haven't actually seen him counting out the skills for that mission. But apparently he's doing so now. This is where his artifact is. Yes, it was indeed the Mysterious Orb. That was the only card that made sense here. So he's probably showing the mission skills here. We're looking for Anthropology, Honor, that should be on Tekeni Gemor, Leadership, and Anthro and 3 Security. So he has completed that mission. That should be good for 35 points, and with his labor camp points, that also should put him across the dead end threshold. And he acquires his artifact, the Mysterious Orb, which allows him to relocate any one personnel to any legal position on the table. He moves his forces back to clash at Chintoka. There's his captive Kalita. And with a whole stack of cards in play, what does Niall do next? With a big crew, there's always the danger of hitting a higher the few and then falling back under the 50 points that you need to beat the dead end. It looks like he's attempting with one personal, and that's your galaxy is impure. It's a random kill, so that personal can't go on and won't see the next dilemma. So what does Neil do next? He knows there's a galaxy is impure on that mission now. So what a lot of players do is they play lots of dilemmas that kill more. Neil decides to end his turn by drawing a whole lot of cards, 4 extra cards from his 4 copies of new arrivals with waiting trial and 1 for new arrivals. And Andreas starts off with playing another strategic sector by mutating away another cop, if I see that correctly. Neil tries to cancel that. Andreas plays another mutation. Has Neil another counter? Doesn't look the way. So this time it goes through. There's Maquis again, drawing a card for continuing mission. And there's the mysterious orb. It can be played at any time. And Neil relocates Maquis to the Cardassian homeworld, so he can't do any exchanging shenanigans here. Nice move. The other free play is another copy of Kalita. So the mysterious orb was placed in hand. Andreas still decides to exchange Maquis to give Neil a cop instead, simply so he can play the Maquis again from hand on his next turn. So Andreas, with his 24 points, can't get through the dead end at Break Prisoner for the moment. So he'll have to look at Find Hidden Base. Of course, if we look at that mission, we see that we can't attempt it with non-alliance or Cardassians. So we need some other trick to be able to attempt that. But he can, of course, also fly to one of his space missions there. He's trying to decide which personal to use for that. There's Santos L. Helper, there's Michael Eddington. And he's going to put them all on a ship. But where does he go now? I think I see Lon Suda in his hand. Another Voyager icon personal that would have to be brought in via Maquis. By the way, the way to attempt Find Hidden Base would of course be to download For the Cause with Defending the Homes. But it looks like he's not yet ready to do that. And he sends it back to Neil, who scores more labor camp points. Plays more copies of Awaiting Trial. So he's up to 8 card draws at the end of his turn right now. I see Mila I see Colonel Kira, so Mila is played. And Colonel Kira, more female power, is added to the mix here. And it looks like we're in for a big attempt, if I see that correctly. Some people stay inside the hidden fighter. Neil probably still debating whether it's worth sending only a smaller crew. So that was one sacrifice for the Galaxies Impure. There's the mission fatigue. And it looks like Neil is ending his turn there. Back to Andreas, he's playing Maces again. Trying to play another strategic sector. It's countered by a Kevin Uxbridge. That would have been his card play. Has he got anything to play for free? It looks like Andreas can't do another free play. Moving the Cosette over to find hidden base. And drawing to end. Neil is scoring 5 more points from the labor camp. Still has the geologists for processor mining. There's yet another copy of Awaiting Trial. There's the Federation Cardassian version of Garak, if my eyes don't deceive me. More Awaiting Trials. And it looks like the triple affiliation version of Odo is hitting the table here. So as we can see, the personal output is far under what some other decks can do, but the dilemmas are what are keeping these two decks alive here. And it looks like Neil is going in with a big attempt. Or maybe not. Maybe the stack of dilemmas is a bit too intimidating there. He has a solid personal selection to get through some of those attrition dilemmas that kill one and then require skills like Rules of Obedience and Misinterpreted History or a minion disintegration protocol. So that is the kill for your Galaxies Impure, followed by Mission Fatigue. And it is indeed Misinterpreted History, so the personal with the highest cunning or the most treachery will be killed. I think there is a double treachery in Security Chief Garak, and the highest cunning could be the 8 on Tekeni Gemor. I think Garak, this version has a 9 actually, so these two are our targets. And of course, Andreas has the right to look at the other personal as well. He has picked his target. Security Chief Garak goes into the discard pile. And before he goes out, he uses a special download to grab a Cardassian disruptor rifle. And I think Andreas has already looked at the personal to double check whether they can beat the wall part on the misinterpreted history dilemma. It requires exobiology and to leadership, or law and archaeology. And it looks like Niall can't beat it with these personal. So the dilemma goes back under to be faced again on the next attempt. This sends it probably back to Andreas. There's another Anheizer. Just from watching this game, I'm not entirely sure what Andreas is waiting for here. In order to attempt find hidden base, he probably needs to download for the course. I haven't seen that yet. It might be somewhere else, but no, he indeed moves his people over to the space mission that doesn't have any affiliation requirements to attempt it. Study Badlands. He plays a preparation to look at the bottom dilemma, but Niall cancels it with an Amanda Rogers. So no trickery for Andreas here. He's looking through this card pile again. If there are any targets worth bringing in for a Maquis substitution. And let's see what he's doing here. At this point, time is probably running out. So it looks like this is Andreas's last turn. And if I've been following the game correctly, he's behind in points. Both players have a mission done, but Niall has a significant advantage with his labor camp and process ore mining points. So Andreas would have to complete a mission now to take back the lead. If time has indeed already been called, Niall could simply take the last turn of the game and immediately end it by not playing any personal or other cards in his play and draw cards phase, not executing any orders, not attempting any missions, not risking running into any higher the fewer or other cards that cost him points, but simply go immediately to his draw cards and end of turn phase and taking the modified win. But only if he is indeed in the lead. But it looks like Andreas is going to attempt now. It looks like he has a stack of 10 to 12 personal in his hand. Still see Captain Chakotay, 2 Mevilles, Belana Torres, Carlitas. There's the phaser. And I think the mission requires 2 navigation and 2 stellar cartography. I believe the stellar cartography is on Meville, so he should have that part covered. But what dilemmas has Niall put for him to encounter there? At this point, you will have a crowd of 1E players no longer sitting, but rather standing in excitement around the table, watching these final turns play out. Andreas still hasn't decided what to do with this stack of personnel. Doesn't want to commit to a full attempt. But every personnel he sends to redshirt will of course be fewer resources for his main attempt then. But it looks like he's going to redshirt. And Niall reveals the first dilemma. And that is the arsenal divided. And to beat that, Andreas needs a lot of universals. He has a good number of those. He needs to divide his unique personnel into 2 piles of his choice, face down. Niall will then get to choose one of those piles to be stopped, unseen, not knowing what these guys are. And Andreas will still have to have the staffing for the ship and integrity greater than 27 from his remaining personnel. So if he sends in a big crew now, he should have no trouble fulfilling the integrity requirement because he has lots of universal guys. But the ship staffing, he doesn't need any icons, but I think he does need a Federation personnel. So in order to make sure that they're not confusing the ship that has already been stopped, they're moving it out of the way for the moment. It's still at Study Badlands, but just to make sure it doesn't get mixed up in the proper attempt that is undoubtedly following here. Andreas is debating how best to divide his personnel into 2 groups. And Niall gets to pick one of these piles to be stopped. Apparently a rules question has just come up. They are double checking something. Might be to do with the ship staffing, whether they need a Federation personnel to keep this runabout staffed or not, because that might change the selection of personnel that Andreas puts into his piles. I don't remember anybody approaching me with that question, so whatever it was, they were apparently able to resolve it amongst themselves. By the way, we had lots of very interesting rules questions over the weekend, and my eternal thanks go out to knowledgeable people like Michael van Bremen and Stefan Slaby, especially when it comes to Borg, who were very quick and always helpful to interrupt their own games for a second and confirm my rulings or explain to me why it actually works in a different way. So thank you so much, Michael and Steve, and also Peter and Paddy. Apparently their rules issue has been resolved, and Andreas is now debating what to do. It might actually have been the question whether if Maces is stopped aboard the ship, can he still use his exchange ability and bring in another personnel aboard the stopped ship? And this is something that I remember talking about, and we have clarified how that would happen, how that would work in that situation. If I had to guess now with the arsenal divided, I'll probably expect something like Cytherians that moves the ship away. So my guess would be that Andreas is not rushing through this final mission here in one go. He will lose some of his people to the Ars Divided, and then I think he has at least 2 more dilemmas to work through, probably even 3. I don't see this happening on this turn. Niall is pointing at the other stop chip here. So apparently Andreas decides to take out maces before he attempts and brings in another universal to have more attributes to go through the arsenal divided, which is a fair call. So it looks like those are the personnel that will definitely go through. They have an Anheizer that can be put into Federation mode, so he would still have a Federation personnel aboard the Federation Affiliation Runabout. And indeed he attempts again, counting up the integrity from these guys. And they're all attributes +2 from Captain Chakotay on the other ship there. So they go through, and that is a maglock. Do they have 3 officer? I don't see it. There were 2 Anheizers with security classification, so they can't beat that. But they might be in the other crew. Captain Chakotay should be 1. And I think the Kalitas are also officers. There's the phaser to give them extra strength. Belana is an engineer, so she doesn't help. Miville is a medical. I think I see only 2 officers among Andreas's remaining personnel here. So my guess is he can't beat the maglock with these people. And if that is indeed the case, he draws to end. And time should have been called. So if I'm right, Niall would simply have to immediately end his turn without risking any point loss to take home the modified win for the World Championship title, and that is indeed what he does. He extends his hand, he takes the modified win, not risking anything, and that was a slog. But Niall prevailed with 1 mission to Andreas's 1 mission, but thanks to Labor Camp and process ore mining points, Niall has taken home the title of Star Trek CCG First Edition World Champion for the first time. Congratulations, Niall. Congratulations also to Andreas for showing up with a magnificent deck that seeds no less than 29 dilemmas and plays through the World Championship final with only 1 non-dilemma seed card. Well played, gentlemen. They are just looking at each other's dilemmas, debating what could they have done differently, would it have been worth going to a different mission instead, and they will probably talk about this game for a long time to come. That concludes the Star Trek CCG First Edition World Championships 2025. We had 20 players on day 1 that represented players from North America, from various countries across Europe. We had 3-time world champion Peter Ludwig in the field. We had 3-time world champion Michael van Bremen in the field. We had 2013 world champion Steve Slaby in the field, 2010 world champion Andreas Rheinländer, and now Niall Matthew joins the company of these Star Trek CCG legends by winning his first World Championship title. Maybe not his last. We don't yet know where the World Championships 2026 are going to be, but if you enjoy this game at all, have a look at TrekCC, look at the announcements. It's probably going to be in North America next year, and if there is any chance that I can make it, I'll try and be there and hopefully run into some of you there as well. That said, I hope you have enjoyed this coverage of the finals game there. Again, congratulations to Niall and Andreas for putting on this performance in the finals, and I hope I'll see them again at another tournament in the future soon. Thanks very much for watching. Expand your power in the universe. Bye.